All right, my guest today is the host of the very popular podcast Dogma Debate with David Smalley and author of Baptized Atheist. His very diplomatic style of challenging believers has earned him accolades, respect, and now has placed him amongst the great names of modern atheism. David Smalley. Hello, David.
Hi.
Thank you for coming to the Valley. Appreciate that.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
David, your podcast is very popular in the U.S., but right here in Canada, you're not as well known. Can you give us your story?
My story. Goodness gracious. How far back do you want to go? I was 15 years old. I got baptized. That's the first time I started taking religion seriously. When I got baptized, and I thought, if I'm going to be a crusader for Christ, I better know what product I'm selling. So I started reading the Bible, and that in itself pretty much deconverted me. But as you mentioned, my book, Baptized Atheist, is a lot more detailed as far as how it actually went, what happened. Yeah, you're right. I don't know a whole bunch of listeners from Canada. I know that we have some. Of course, we hear from people in, I believe, 42 different countries. But yeah, not a huge, strong listener base. So hopefully, this show can give me that valley bump. What do you think?
Well, I'm sure hoping so. And hopefully we'll see you up here in Canada in one of the big events like Imagine No Religion.
Yeah, I would love to. I almost made it this year and we weren't able to work it out. But hopefully next year.
Okay, we'll go and lobby for, we know the management. We'll lobby them for that.
Excellent. Dude, yeah, let's make that happen.
Okay.
Yeah, so now I'm hosting Dogma Debate Radio, and we own, I'm actually the CEO of Secular Media Group, LLC. And under that umbrella, Secular Media Group, we've got Secular Media Network, which is a whole branch of other radio shows and podcasts. And Dogma Debate is actually a live radio broadcast that goes out. It's on iHeartRadio. It goes out to multiple different areas, and then it also goes up as a podcast later. And then we've got Secular News Network, atheistaudiobooks.com, where we produce all sorts of audiobooks. And we've got a bunch of different things going. So yeah, I'm pretty busy.
Wow, very impressive.
Yes, indeed. You're known for having a very diplomatic style, and you chose to do atheism the diplomatic way. Why was that? Was that just like a natural inkling, or you figured it was just a better way of challenging people?
It's really, I just saw a lot of people ruining conversations that could go very, very well. And I see sometimes where a believer is in the conversation with a non-believer, and the believer will say something that the atheist considers completely ridiculous and absurd, and the atheist will say that. Well, that's dumb. Well, that's absurd. Or your Jesus is just Santa Claus for adults. And what I see happen when there's an insult thrown is the believer throws the walls up. They get very defensive. They don't want to continue the conversation. And if they do, it's now a fight because there's been an insult. And what I found much more effective is to ask questions. It's what's known as a Socratic method, much like what Socrates did. I would ask enough questions. And let me give you a quick example of how it worked perfectly. I had a Christian police officer in studio, and we were talking, and he was telling me his ideas and his beliefs. And I was just asking questions. I would say, do you believe the Bible is the literal word of the Christian God? And he would say, yes. And I would say, so there's no mistakes in it. Nope. What if it contradicts science? Well, then science is wrong. The Bible has to be right. Okay, so we went through all these questions. He was answering very predictably as a fundamentalist would. And then we got to the end of it where we were talking about Numbers 22, where Balaam and the donkey have a conversation. And I said, do you believe that a man and a donkey had a conversation? He said, well, yeah. And then so we kept on going, and I let a little space go in between there. And then I just said, I've got to be honest with you about something. I said, it worries me. It concerns me that you carry a gun for a living and have to make split-second logical decisions, and you believe that a man and a donkey had a conversation. He laughed at himself and said, well, when you put it that way, I sound ridiculous. So let's think about that. All I did was say back to him what he's already told me. He told me he's a cop. He told me he carries a gun. And he told me he believes a man and a donkey had a conversation. But they never put them together like that in their own sequence. He has completely separated his work as a police officer from this ridiculous belief. So I ask enough questions and take out all the spaces, and I put them in a situation of having to face this cognitive dissonance that they are so trying desperately to avoid. And so that's really what the questions do. The questions are non-threatening. And then occasionally I have opinions and I kind of call them on stuff. But the questions are a non-threatening way of getting them to hear how absurd the belief is. If I tell them your belief is ridiculous, their automatic response, and if you study anything about cognitive behavioral therapy, conflict resolution, management, team building, or psychology, you're going to understand. You want someone to defend a ridiculous position, attack it. But if you want someone to change their views on it, ask them questions about it. And when they hear themselves sound ridiculous, they will stop themselves from saying it. And they will be much more effective at deconverting themselves than you can ever be by insulting them.
Besides that, I don't think there's any precedent of donkeys testifying in cases in Texas, is there?
Not yet. But this is Texas. Don't
don't count it out.
Breath.
So you obviously feel this approach is much more effective than firebrand, or do you think that there's a place for both?
I do think there's a place for both. I personally believe this is more effective. I believe a diplomatic approach is more effective, but I've also seen how my counterparts like Dave Silverman could be effective with people, and sometimes getting your belief shocked can really make you stop and think about it. Now, I'm starting to learn that I think there are different venues, right? So I don't think you should take a Dave Silverman approach to talk to your grandmother. Okay? But if your preacher is screaming at you that this is horrible and you want to snap something back that's going to be a quick sound bite for him to go home and remember, or for the congregation to hear you defend yourself, maybe a Dave Silverman approach would work. What this David Smalley approach does is more along the lines of talking with family members, helping them understand your atheism, helping them understand that it's not a phase you're going through, that you're not just angry at any particular God for any particular reason, that you're not acting out, you're not being rebellious. This is a diplomatic, Socratic way of explaining your lack of faith and also simultaneously having them question their own.
Interesting. Now, obviously, you guys are obviously in the thick of it here, as compared to up here in Canada. So, what do you think the status of atheism is on the front line down there in Texas, or in the U.S. for that matter?
Surprisingly, we're doing very well. A recent Pew Research study just came out that showed how much secular Americans are growing. As a matter of fact, we just covered this on the show last week. The people who identify as Christians in the United States dropped by 8% in the last 7 years. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're talking 350, 360 million people, 8% is a pretty big chunk of people who no longer identify as Christian. Also, the number of people who identified from nuns over to atheist jumped up substantially. So seeing these types of numbers tells us that we're doing the right thing. There's still a lot of threats. There's still a lot of things going on. We still have folks like Sarah Palin, Michelle Bachmann, Ted Cruz, Rick Perry running for public office. And so we still have work to do. We do still have work to do. But it's showing its results. We're getting somewhere.
I'm glad to hear that, because when I interviewed one of your friends and colleagues, or former colleagues, on Raw, I was telling him exactly that. From our vantage point, we see religiosity, if you can say, seep across the border. It seems to be trying to spread up here, and I'm quite concerned about that here as a Canadian, because most Canadians are quite apathetic about that kind of stuff. But you can see there's kind of a resurgence, especially creationism.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we actually, it's funny you mentioned that. We were here in studio just now. I was with Lydia, and she was recording a 5-part video series on creationism, Darwin, intelligent design, and evolution. And what we're doing is we're putting them up on our login site, which is login.dogmadebate.com for those interested, to go get extra behind-the-scenes content. And we were recording those videos, and one of the studies she brought up was how creationism has infiltrated multiple countries, including a lot of non-English speaking countries. So we like to think that creationism is just this American idea, this American poison. It's infiltrating many, many countries right now. So we may be sort of winning the battle to some degree in America, but places like Canada, like you said, which are very, just sort of complacent with the idea and a little apathetic, that could be very, very dangerous. That could be very dangerous.
Yeah, it's a bit like the scenario of finding patient zero, right? And you found patient zero, but the disease is still spreading in a way.
Right. Exactly. Great analogy.
I wanted to go back to something you were saying earlier, and you're saying when you attack people, they put their walls up. And I know that a lot of atheists here will say, well, I'm not attacking you as a person, but I'm attacking your beliefs. But from my experience, most Christians are so intrinsically bound in their beliefs that they don't see a difference between themselves and their beliefs.
You're exactly right. There's a concept known as group psychology. Freud coined this in 1921. And what he's getting at here is, in order for a group to strengthen, okay, the individual components of that group must be integrated with the individuals of that group. And for the group to become integrated, the individuals must replace a piece of themselves with a piece of the group. And as an example of that, let's take it outside of religion and let's think for a moment about a football game. You go to a football game, you see a bunch of guys there with their shirts off. It's, 10 below, and these guys have their shirts off with letters painted across their chest for their team. Well, if you see one guy sitting in his front yard in 10 below with one letter painted on his chest, he's insane. Okay? But if you see six guys with letters painted across their chest in a crowd full of 50,000, well, that's just group psychology. Why are they able to do that? Well, the betterment of the group, the displaying of the faith in the group or the pride in the group, the group's pride has now overcome the individual's pride. So the individual's pride isn't as necessary. The group's pride is more important. Ego, same way. My ego's not as important. I will look like a complete idiot and dye my hair blue and go without my shirt because it's better for the group as a whole. Well, now, once that has happened, imagine walking up to that guy in the middle of the game, in the middle of the crowd, and grabbing the one guy. There's six of them, but you grab the guy with the L on his chest and go, hey, man, let's talk about this. You're being an idiot right now. Think about this. These are dumb ideas. These are stupid ideas. This L does not matter. You're attacking him. You are attacking him because he has integrated himself with the group. There's no way in hell you're going to get him to back away from that and go, you know what? You're right. I'm going to go home right now, take a shower, and put on a shirt. He's not going to leave the group, okay? So it's the same way. When I hear people say, I can attack your ideas without attacking you, you're being naive. You're saying that that the believer has separated their worldview from themselves, just like you have. And they haven't. No one has said, I am atheism. You can attack atheism and we can have a perfectly friendly discussion. But if I attack Christianity or say something insulting about Jesus, you take that as a personal insult. So what people need to realize is you have separated yourself from your worldview. The believer that you're talking to has not. And if you go back and watch a movie I made with a Christian filmmaker called My Week in Atheism with John Christie, you will hear him say, I am that religion. I am that belief. I would never say I am atheism. So think about your audience when you're saying that. Whenever you start talking to people and you want to challenge their ideas, challenge them. But if you attack those ideas or you insult those ideas or if you ridicule those ideas, that person will take it personally. And you've got to get them to separate that group psychology before they can start having rational discussions about their faith. And I think the way to friendly approach.
When that
Great analogy, but by the way, I would say when you're talking to Canadians, you're much better off to reference hockey instead of football.
then it comes right back to the cognitive dissonance that you were talking about too. That your questioning method makes people aware of that in a way that they hadn't been before. Right.
They don't have to think about things. They won't intentionally think about these things in a row. Right. Mm-hmm. For example, here's a perfect example. I was sitting in my mom's living room the other day, and there was a tornado, and there was a tornado on the news of how it had just ripped through this entire town, and several people were dead, houses were demolished, and this one lady, they stick a microphone in her face, and she says, "Boy, God sure was watching out for us." And I just turned to my mom and I said, "Please tell me you see the problem with this." She's like, "No, they're safe, honey. God was watching out for them." I said, "Why didn't God just stop the tornado to begin with?" She goes, "Well, that's not what they mean. What they mean is they're watched out for." And I said, "Okay." I said, "But what about the hidden implications here of someone who did die 2 blocks over? Were they not blessed?" She said, well, that's not what they mean. I said, then tell me what they mean. She says, well, what they mean is they feel special. And I said, okay, if they feel special, that means there's somebody that's not special, right? She just shook her head. Well, no. I said, well, then how does that mean that? She just looked at me, very confused. Well, I don't really know how to explain it, David, but you're making me uncomfortable. I just said, good. Good. It's supposed to make you uncomfortable. My mom has never put the thoughts together on her own that if you say you're blessed, that means someone is not blessed. She's never put them together. And all I did was ask a series of questions, and her inability to answer me told me she was thinking about it. However, if I would have looked at that TV and said, oh, my God, these dumb Christians, I can't believe they say that. It's so ridiculous. Your little fairy daddy in the sky doesn't give a damn about you. My mom would have gotten so defensive, she would not be thinking about her position.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, so you've become pretty well known as an activist there. How do you deal with what I call apatheist? You know, people that are atheists, but can't be bothered. How do you deal with people like that?
Well, I try to make them activists. I try to talk to them about why it matters. And a lot of times what I do is I say, look, just pick a problem in the country. Pick something that you think is an issue. And they'll say something like, medical advancements. Okay, let's take medical advancements. We can trace it back to the Catholic Church and why we are forbidden from making scientific research in stem cell research is back to religion. You can take issues of equality with gay marriage. Of course, that is rooted back to religion. Let's talk about women's rights and reproductive rights and not having health care for women because of all of these abortion clinics being shut down. We can trace that back to religion. Let's talk about, and even when you look at how gays are treated in general, it's typically hatred of women and the feminization of gay men that leads us back to religion to see why we're so aggravated and hateful towards women and so aggravated and hateful towards gays. Almost any problem you pick that's going on in the country can be traced somehow back to religious roots. And when I connect that to something that they are passionate about and they see the religious problems at the root of it, a lot of times they're like, maybe that's what I need to get involved with.
Yeah, interesting. I totally agree. My personal beef was always environmental. And
Absolutely.
I just can't figure out why people can't see the simple phrase, that you have dominion over the earth and do what you will is at the base of everything that's capitalism. And anyway, we could go on that forever.
Exactly. No, you're exactly right. That's another great point. Environmental, poor treatment of animals.
Yeah, totally.
God gave us dominion over animals. Who cares if they're in tiny cages and beaten and chained to the ground? Why not eat veal? Why do we need to care if the chickens are cage free or not? Why does any of this matter? God gave us dominion over the earth. So if you are passionate about the environment, same way with climate change. Mm-hmm. Well, if God created this earth for us, there's nothing wrong with the climate. It makes people stick their fingers in their ears and not take care of the earth and the animals and the women and the people and the equality that we should be fighting for as humanists. So these people who don't care and don't believe, all you got to do is find out what they're passionate about and trace the problem back to religion, and they're very likely to get involved.
Yeah, and the same thing with racism, right? It was perfectly normal to say this person was not human, therefore this person was just another animal, and therefore
exactly.
racism,
And how much the Bible was used in the Civil War to justify slavery. Absolutely.
You've taken this one step further with founding Secular Media Group. What are your plans for this project? What do you plan on doing with all this stuff?
I want to grow a network of like-minded folks that are putting out excellent content. We've got very.
So you're not going to have us on the group anytime soon, then?
That I don't know. We will have to talk about it, though. We like to pride ourselves on having very high-quality content, very high-quality produced content. And it's not just the network. There's the network, and then there's the news network. We're looking for writers, bloggers, opinion pieces, journalists, stringers, videographers who want to go out and do man-on-the-street type interviews. As far as the secular news network piece of it. And then we've got atheist audiobooks. We're producing and directing and recording audiobooks. I think we just finished our 18th book, and we've got 6 more in production right now. We've partnered with Audible and iTunes to make these books available to people all over the world. We're just continuing to grow, continuing to reach more people. If I had to sum it up in one sentence, what's my goal? It's to educate the public. That's the point. It's to educate the public. Neil deGrasse Tyson told me, he said, you can sit around and complain and make jokes about Congress and the president. No one person is going to fix this. Mm-hmm. The people who are complaining about our government are the people who put them in office. And so we don't need the right guy in office. We don't need the right Congress. We don't need the right president. If we could just get Obama or Hillary elected, then all these problems would go away. That's a naive way to look at it. He said the point is the public is ignorant of these issues. So we need to educate the public. So that's what we're trying to do through multiple broadcasts, through entertainment, through secular news, through blogs, opinion pieces, videos, YouTube channels, atheist audiobooks, whatever it takes. We are trying to educate the public.
That's beautiful. Mm-hmm. And you're doing a great job at it, by the way.
Well, thank you.
I'm a fan. I've actually downloaded the audiobook Audible app, so I'm going to be a customer as well now.
Very cool. Excellent.
Well, here's your chance, my friend. Unless you had another question, Karen.
No.
Perfect. Here's the mic is all yours. Plug yourself. Be shameless. Go right ahead.
I've kind of been doing that the whole show.
Well, if you got anything else to add.
Kind of walk around I'm kind of a human billboard because, like I said, the whole point is to educate the public. So it's not that I'm trying to promote me; I'm trying to promote all of the resources we have for people to come and take part in. There are some people who like more firebrand stuff. Well, we've got firebrand shows on Secular News Network. The website to go to, secularmediagroup.com or secularmedianetwork.com. Right now they go to the same place. Secularnewsnetwork.com, where we just broke a story of a former Baltimore police officer revealed some behind-the-scenes information about the Baltimore Police Department, some internal racism going on, some cops that were arrested, even some pretty vital things were happening behind the scenes there in Baltimore. We had a former Baltimore cop on the air talking about it, and that turned into a secularnewsnetwork.com news release. And then, of course, atheistaudiobooks.com and dogmadebate.com. We're kind of all over the place. I just got off a 7-week tour where we were doing live Dogma Debate radio episodes for, UU churches, universities. I was doing live debates. We've got a lot of stuff going on. So I would encourage people to go to dogmadebate.com, listen to the episodes, subscribe to the podcast, and sign up at login.dogmadebate.com for even more content if we're not giving you enough already.
Beautiful, beautiful. Your Secular Media Group, is it strictly a U.S. thing for now, or do you plan to have international plans after that? Do you plan on growing it out of the country?
I think international would be a good step. I really do. I think it would be a good step.
All right.
Well, we thank you for all that you do because we love your podcast. And
yeah, totally. You got friends north of the border there, David.
So keep doing
Excellent.
it all. That's wonderful.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, David, and good luck on all your projects out there.
All right. Thank you. And thanks for having me today. I appreciate it.
Our pleasure. Thank you.